Okay. So before we get started, I'm just gonna briefly tell everyone about Whole Communities Whole Health. So we are basically one of 3 grand challenges at the University of Texas, which means that we are actually funded by the university to address kind of a bigger issue project in both an interdisciplinary way and in a way that's community engaged. So for us, what that looks like is we are working with 160 families in the southeastern crescent of Austin who all have children under the age of 5, at least when they start in the project. And then we follow them for 5 years and we look at social determinants of health, basically. So we look at, hello, welcome, come in. We look at physical health factors, mental health, cultural values, environmental health, like air and water quality, a whole range of different things. And then our goal is to give the results back to the participants as part of it. Also to share those results ultimately with the community once we have enough of that data, right, collected from the group. And also to do all of this in a way that is grounded in the community's values, the community's needs, and looking at it from this holistic kind of interdisciplinary way. So we do that in different ways. We have like over 70 measures in the study. We also have some affiliated studies. It's not just that one study, but that is our primary, flagship kind of project. And so we do use some elements of technology. There's different devices that the families can use. In the study, they can opt into or out of it because there are different requirements for those and not everyone wants to do that, so that's fine. But ultimately, we want to work with the community to do research that matters to the community and is giving important information and meaningful information back to the community as well. Not just to extract the data and go write some papers, right? So, and we do have some members of our community strategy team here on Zoom and in person, and our community liaison. So raise your hand real quick if you're on our CST. Thank you for all that you do. And so with that, I do want to, you're probably wondering, well, why are you hosting this training on AI? Is that related? How is it related? So basically, like I said, we don't want to just go extract the data and that's it. We want to do things to give back. So not just giving back the data, but giving back in other ways, right? To the area where we serve and the people who we work with. So we do our big annual event, the Community Resource Day, that will be April 18th in 2026. So mark your calendars. But also we do trainings for our community partners and other organizations who work in the area from time to time. So at the end, I'll have a survey where it'll ask y'all, if there's any other topics you want to have trainings on. So please be sure to fill that out at the end if there's anything else you'd like to see us do. And with that, I don't want to take up any more time. I will turn it over to Casey Ford, our wonderful presenter for today. So please join me in welcoming Casey.
Thank you so much for coming. I'm very pleased to be here with all of you. My name is Casey. I work in the Office of Academic Technology here at UT Austin. And what we do is we evaluate technologies for campus and see if they will be a good thing to bring into the classroom or not a good thing to bring into the classroom. And then we write policy and we make recommendations about what technologies we're using here on campus. But my role is to focus just on the responsible use of AI for teaching and learning on campus. So in doing so, I have to work with AI a lot. I do a lot of studying about AI. And so I'm very happy here to be talking about this subject. I always tell people I am not an evangelist for this technology. That is not my job. My job is to think about ways in which it can be used to solve the problems that we have, just like you do in your organization. So that's the perspective I come from. And with that in mind, I like to start with asking you where you are on a scale of AI use right now, because it's something that's constantly being thrown at us, right? So then there's no right or wrong answer to this, but on this scale, I'm an expert, I know everything about it. I'm curious about it, I kind of use it, I dabble. I don't really care. I'm very scared of it, or I avoid it altogether. I have a huge aversion to it. Where would you say you fall? And also would love to hear in the chat.
Curious.
Okay. I'm hoping if you came to this, you're curious.
Yeah.
sometimes I get people, okay, cool. Oh, we have like all curiosity people here. That's fantastic if that's the case. I mean, that, like I said, there are no wrong answers here. But I often talk to professors and they're either on, usually on like an extreme end of the scale. So it's nice to have some open-minded people in the audience here. Okay, great. Well, I love that. So we're gonna, I think probably when we're clicking off.
Oh, yeah, I have to click back on the.
Okay, no worries. I'm happy to see the chat. So here's what our plan for the session is today, and then I will definitely leave time for questions and also would love to hear questions as they come up as we're having this conversation. So feel free to shout out. We can just turn this into a conversation. It doesn't have to be me talking at you the whole time. But usually it's helpful when we're thinking about how we're going to use AI in what we do to know what AI is, because then we can really start to understand what it's good at and what it's not good at. And then we're going to identify situations where generative AI can responsibly help your organization save time. And then we're going to apply a responsible use check to AI tasks. So we're gonna make sure that we're using AI in a responsible way. So I usually like to start with a definition of AI because people basically call everything AI these days, like even if it's not there. But it's just technology that enables machines to mimic human intelligence. Mimic is the key word here. Machines are not intelligent. Machines are not human. Machines don't have brains. They just can look like they are intelligent because of the ways that they're programmed. So this is an image I really like. This is 1997 Deep Blue beating the Grandmaster Barry Kasparov in chess, the first time a computer beat a Grandmaster in chess. And important to note, right? Like, yes, a computer can beat us in chess. Does that mean that it's intelligent like humans? No. But it can do some very specific things really well if we let it. So I also like to start with some terms because, again, like AI, these terms get thrown out a lot and sometimes they just don't get explained. So generative AI, or sometimes you'll be called Gen AI, that's tools that create new output based on patterns learned from large data sets. So it's just when you hear generative AI, which is like the chat bots that you use, like a chat GPT, or the things that create video and images, the thing to know is they've been given a bunch data, and they've looked at that data and they've made some analysis of it. And when you ask it for something, it's just using what it knows about what you're asking to make something new. That's the key thing to think about it. It's always trying to make something new from the different parts that it already has learned about. So generative AI is never going to give you the same answer to a question twice. Not exactly the same. Because it's trying to create something novel every time it comes up. And that's something to know when you're trying to think about using it to do things like analyze data. It's always trying to just look for patterns. It's really not trying to find a source of truth. Agentic AI is just like something that's really bubbling up to the surface in conversations about AI now. We won't get into agentic AI a bunch in this session, but I'm happy to talk to you about it. That's systems that autonomously plan, decide, and act to accomplish multi-step tasks. So if you keep up with this stuff, you might have seen that OpenAI, the people who make ChatGPT, released their own web browser, like a Chrome or a Firefox a few weeks ago, and it has an agent in it that if I take it to work websites, I can say, fill in this form for me, or submit this, or do my campus assignment, and it will go ahead and do all of those things. We call that an agent. It's acting on your behalf to do a task. A large language model, you hear about these a lot. The chatbots you use are based on large language models. It just means that machines can now process and spit out information like language like we can. They can speak your language, and that is really the breakthrough that has caused this like AI renaissance in popular culture right now, because the difference for us now is that we can ask a computer something in plain language and it can give it back to us in plain language. Whereas maybe there are some things that generative AI does now that are not that novel, like computer programmers could always ask computers to analyze data in certain ways, but now we can ask for these things in plain English, and that's really made the difference in how we use these tools. A prompt is an input that you give an AI system to guide its response. So when I'm talking to an AI in plain language, I can use English to ask for anything I want, or any other language at this point. But if you use a prompt that's clear and can guide the AI, you'll get a better response and you'll have to do less back and forth. So prompting, knowing how to talk to an AI is an important skill that we're learning as these tools start to become more common. We'll talk about effective ways to prompt in this session. The last concept is one I really like because I think it gives us some language to talk about how AI affects our work and what we do. So synthetic media is media that's made by AI. So images, video, text that are created or significantly altered by artificial intelligence. And I find that to be a useful distinction because then we can start to talk about, okay, is this something that's synthetic or is this something that a human made for me? And there's reasons why synthetic might be okay, and there's reasons why I'd really want this to be something that a human made. And that is a distinction we can start to talk about when we have a term for it. So I talked a little bit about generative AI and how it works, but just to kind of hone in on what the actual process looks like. So let's say I want to make something that can spit out a picture of a cat for me. Like I just really need unique pictures of cats all the time. If I was going to start doing that from a generative AI standpoint, I would give it a bunch of data. I'd say, okay, here are millions of pictures, perhaps billions of pictures. And from that, it starts to learn, and maybe I will label some of them, like this looks like a cat. This is a cat. This is a picture of a cat. Maybe after a while, I don't even have to label the pictures anymore because it's learned enough about what a cat looks like to start identifying cats in different pictures. From all of that data, it creates a model of what a cat looks like. So that model is in the case of images, it's a diffusion model. In the case of things like language, it's a large language model. I've created an idea of what a resume looks like, of what a recommendation letter looks like, of what a call to action to marketing newsletter looks like. The model kind of knows what those are because it's used all of the data to figure those out. When I input a prompt into one of those models, it will output synthetic media for me. So this is, like fairly simple from its output. Obviously, the process to train these models is pretty complicated. But when you know that it doesn't, in that second area, it doesn't know what a cat is. It doesn't know that a cat is furry. It doesn't know that a cat purrs when you pet it. It just knows from images what a cat looks like. And if I ask it to make what a cat looks like, it can do that. Start to understand generative AI doesn't have a concept of things. It doesn't have symbols, and it like our brain has symbols. It just knows labels and from the data it has, and it's all digital data. So that is, when we start to talk about what the difference is between when you're talking about an artificial intelligence mimicking a human experience and what human experience is, those are where we start to come up against the barriers of what artificial intelligence can do. So artificial intelligence has a lot of limitations, and we really like to talk about them in terms of like how it works, so that we can kind of understand, okay, where our boundaries are when we're starting to use it in different ways. So the first one we always talk about is privacy and security. So because of the way these models have been created, what was the first thing we needed to create a model? Data. Right. Well, data is like gold, right? Nowadays. And if I'm using a model, what are they probably doing with what I put into it?
Taking information.
Exactly. Yeah. So privacy and security have been a secondary concern, I would say, in the creation of these models. So an example I like to use is ChatGPT this summer, if you've ever used ChatGPT, you can have a chat, you can like do a task, and then you can share that chat out using a public link with somebody if you're like, look at this conversation I had, look what I came up with. We actually found out this summer that like hundreds of thousands of those chats have been indexed into Google. So you could go and read all of these chats that people thought were like private chats. That's just an example of the ways in which the privacy and security has not been utmost in the development of these tools. So when we're picking and learning about tools and trying to think about how we're going to protect people's data, we'll talk a little bit about how we think about using tools responsibly so that we're making sure that what we're putting into these tools can't possibly be used to train a model and then extracted in some way that we don't intend. The next is hallucinations. We've all heard about hallucinations, I'm sure, at this point. And it's kind of, I don't know, a misnomer, right? Because humans have hallucinations. Really, when we know like what generative AI does, we understand why it hallucinates sometimes. Hallucinates just means I asked for one thing and it completely made up something. Like, give me a source for this claim that I saw, and it says, oh yeah, this is a citation for the source. The citation looks great, but the thing has never existed. But we understand that that's because it knows about patterns, right? So it knows what a citation should look like. It might even know the name of a journal or what a likely paper title might be, but it just makes up the citation. And there are ways that people are improving upon this, but something to always do is check the output, especially if the output is important, something like a fact or a citation, so that you're not unwittingly putting incorrect information into what you're doing. The next is misalignment. So this is kind of like a hallucination, but a little different. It's like I asked for something and you gave me something totally different. So I want to say, okay, I have these 30 rows of data. Please do this with these 30 rows of data. It says, great, I did this with these 20 rows of data. And you say, no, I wanted all 30. And it sometimes does not make the connection between what you're actually asking for and what it outputs. It's really tempting, just take the output and not double check that, but sometimes that can lead us into trouble. Next is bias. Okay, so we have all this data that we trained everything on. What does data usually have in it? Yeah, I mean, so I have like a lot of examples of this. I mean, the very common one is image diffusion models. If I ask an image diffusion model for a picture of a professional person, it's going to show me a light-skinned person. It's probably going to show me a male. But there's also like biases that are very specific to certain areas and disciplines. So in education, I talk to people a lot about, okay, there's a study, I asked ChatGPT to generate 100 lesson plans for our course. And of those 100 lesson plans, a vast majority of them were instructor-centered. Whereas we know the evidence for how we create an effective lesson plan is that we want it to be student-centered. Well, that's because the data, a lot of what comes in, like what we're trained on, is instructor-centered plans. So it's helpful to think about, okay, these are likely biases that you're going to have in any set of data. Those don't magically get taken away because we've trained an AI model. Those exist because they exist in the data. The next is ethics. I'm really lucky to occasionally work with another grand challenge that we have here at UT, which is the good systems. They focus on the ethical use of AI and study ethics and artificial intelligence. And there are a lot of ethical implications to how we think about AI, so not just bias, but also things like transparency. Are these companies being transparent about where they're getting this data, how they're using this data, if they're taking data from people that did not give them consent to use it, things like how AI is going to affect the workforce. Now we think about the implementation of AI into different places, issues about justice and whether or not these technologies are equally affecting different communities. Or even things like, obviously, environmental justice, right? Like, what kinds of environmental impacts is the use of AI, the proliferation of AI having on us? So that's, a group of issues that we need to think about when we start to use AI. The last, and what I think I talk to students a lot about, and what I talk to faculty about a lot, is cognitive offloading. So that we all know that when I really want to know what I think about something, when I really want to have like deep processing of something, I write about it, right? I write in my diary or write an essay about it, because writing is thinking. But if I constantly offload my writing about something that I'm trying to process to an AI system, then I don't make those cognitive connections in my brain. And that's a huge concern. So when we're thinking about how we're using AI, I always talk to students about how we find what the good friction is in what we do. There's lots of bad friction in our lives, like reformatting data and rewriting the same thing over and over again. But there's also good friction where we're really thinking about something and we're creating connections that can help us later. And I think that kind of meta cognition, the thinking about how you think about things and how you learn about things, is an important piece if you're trying to integrate AI into what you do, because you can start to say, okay, here is where I need to spend the time actually using my brain, and here is where it's okay to upload that thinking to AI so that I can continue to keep myself sharp and ready to use my brain. Any questions or thoughts about limitations? Chat too.
It kind of reminds me of like crowdsourcing something, like taking all the data that it has collected,
Mm-hmm.
you know, through various channels and then making the output available once you prompt it for a specific thing.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it's like really impressive, right? Like we've kind of taken the bulk of human knowledge, at least that's digital, and we've put it into this place where we can ask it questions at any time. Now it's an imperfect way to do that, but yeah, it is in a way, it's just all of us kind of have contributed to this over time. Any other thoughts or questions? So, okay, now that we kind of know what AI, generative AI is, and we talked about the limitations, we start to think about, okay, how do I use this in my own work? I put this slide up just kind of as a way to say, these are some tools that are out there. What I will say is, if you're using data that's confidential or private, I would not suggest using a free generative AI chatbot, or I'd suggest redacting the data if that's what you're going to do. But there are lots of tools out there that will let you, use them. One thing to know is if you're using a free account, in most cases, they are taking whatever you put into it and using it to put back into their training. Yes.
Now that you mentioned that, I have a question. You mentioned before people sharing their like links with their conversation, like their chats.
Yeah.
That then got like you could find them later on Google.
Mm-hmm.
Were those conversations like using a free version or a paid
I think
version?
those were both.
Both.
Because these companies have been moving so fast, they didn't think to make the links private
Okay.
in both cases. I think they have fixed that for whatever that's worth, but something to think about if we're sharing things out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Regardless of if it's a paid version or not.
Right, yes, yeah. Well, and I would also say, I mean, so a lot of these, they have paid versions. For instance, at UT, I know a lot of educational organizations, big organizations that have contracts with companies like this, that we have a clause in our contracts that they can't use any student data or any of our data and put it back into their system. I know there are a couple of these where if you are paying for a version of it, you can turn that function off. It's just, it's a lot to navigate all the time and it's changing a lot. So you do use one of these, just would recommend kind of looking into what their policies are. And again, might be a fine trade-off if the data you're using is not private in some way. Any other questions about these tools? Like I said, I am not a technology evangelist. I'm not here to recommend any one technology to people. I would say there are different pros and cons to using these different tools, and if you wanna ask questions or we wanna have a conversation about that later, you absolutely can. But these are some of the tools that are available for you. Hey, y'all, hello, nice to have you. So, the reason why we talk about like an important skill is being able to talk to these machines, to be able to give a good prompt is because, okay, they can't understand our language, but you know, the more efficient we are with prompting, it does a couple of things. It reduces the chance that you're gonna have misalignment, right? So that I'm asking for one thing, it's giving me a completely other thing, I get frustrated. The other thing is that it helps you really understand what your task is so that we can reduce what we were talking about earlier, the cognitive offloading. Like I really understand what I'm asking this tool to do. We've all, or I have done it, I won't volunteer all the rest of you, but I have sat in front of an AI and been like, I have to write this thing. And it gives me something, I'm like, that's not what I wanted. But if it's like, if I would have spent the 30 seconds to a minute actually trying to understand what my task was, it would have been a lot easier. The third reason to give a good prompt is because you know, every drop in the bucket helps, but like we're using less energy and resources if we ask for what we want the first time and we just go ahead and get what we want out of the tool rather than, I don't know, wish I would ask you for bullet points here. Just take the minute to really think about what a good prompt would be. And that it has a couple of elements. So first is a goal. So what do you actually want for the system to give you? Do you want it to give you some bullet points? Do you want to get it to give you an entire 10-page essay? Do you want it to give you a banner image for a newsletter? What are you actually looking for? The next is context. Context is really helpful, especially when you're asking for something written. Who is your audience? Why do they need this? And like tell it who's involved so it knows how to engage the different audiences and what you're getting. The next is a source. Sources are really helpful for these tools because you can start to give them information so that you don't have to inject it yourself or so that they can further understand the context. And I'll give you some examples in a minute. And then expectations. What do you expect to get out of this? So here's an example. My goal here is I want it to review the notes from a monthly staff meeting and create a summary. Okay, good goal. Just need a summary. I need to send it to my executive director. It's a much different summary than if I was writing it for my coworker or myself. Like that's the context that this needs to get what I want out of prompts. And here are the files. Here's the transcripts. If you're using Copilot and you have it all hooked in, you could just be like, this is the meeting we were talking about. And then I would like an opening paragraph with context, 3 sections, and short bulleted lists. Exactly what I want. It probably only took me like a minute to really think about what I wanted, but the output I'm going to get is so much better than if I would have said, I don't know, it's like a summary of the meeting. I have to spend all this time editing it, and then why am I using AI in the first place? But this is a process that AI is really good at, right? Like looking through a bunch of transcripts or notes and synthesizing information. Talking about like what it's good at. Looking through a bunch of data is one of the things. So, there are 3 places where I think that like when we're thinking about, okay, what's a good task to offload? What are places where I can actually save time and be effective with this tool? Automating repetitive tasks, definitely something AI is great at. So drafting replies, if they're not, we're talking about human-centeredness, there are places where you definitely want to write a reply to somebody, but there also are places where it would be fine to say, got it, moving on. Scheduling, fantastic. And summarizing things, like looking through data and finding the themes. And the next is creating customized content. So you know what you want to say, you just have to like rewrite it to say it in the way that you wanted to. Customized content through AI is really great because you can tailor it to specific audiences. So I'll have an example of that in a minute. And then AI agents. So we talked about AI agentic browsers, AI doing things for you. But you can also create little custom agents using certain kind of things. If you're doing the same thing again and again. So let's say if we're going back up, I have a newsletter and it's always in the same format and I always kind of want it to sound the same. I can create myself a little agent that has all of those instructions. The prompt is already programmed into it. And every time I go to that agent, I say, hey, I have to do a newsletter this month. These are my 3 events. These are the things I want to say. Can you put it in the format that we always put it in? I could do it. Any questions about this? Cool. So I just wanted to show a couple of case examples, like, okay, what does this actually look like in practice? So, you know, I need to send announcements in 3 different formats, and they have to be in different languages. And so, like, I'm writing like nine versions of the same thing. I want to like, it's just taking a lot of time, and also I risk every time I do this, like missing something. So here's a prompt. I have my goal, I have my context, I have my source, and I have my output that I want, right? And in taking a little bit of time to write this prompt, now I have all 9 of those outputs. And all I have to do is read them and make sure they're exactly what I want. Next one, grant need statement, like kind of a hard thing to write sometimes. Oh, you know what? That's not, those 2 things don't match. Sorry about that. I think I was gonna do a grant need one and I changed the way I did it. Works in either case, but okay, we want to do summaries, or we're trying to match a need statement to a grant proposal document, like an RFP. The example there is, here's the format they asked for the need statement in. Here's who the audience is, a little bit about the organization. Here is the RFP link, everything I need to include, and here is the format they asked it. And in this case, community meetings, hard to quickly share summaries with all partners. Okay. Summarize key decisions and action items from our meeting notes. That's our goal. We've got our context. Use the notes and flag anything that clarification. Keep language plain, respectful, easy to read on a phone. We've got everything we need to do what we need. Third case, I'm going to talk a little bit about how we might make an agent. Okay, so let's say I often need to go through a bunch of data to triage something. Here's what I wouldn't do. I wouldn't just put all that data in generative AI and have it try to make that sense of all of it for me. Why wouldn't I do that based on what we've already talked about?
Privacy.
Yeah, definitely. And let's imagine we have a tool that is secure enough to put data into. That's a great point, though. So
Because I want to think about it.
yes, that is definitely one too. I would also say, when we talked about what generative AI is, what is the thing about it? It always tries to give you something new. So if I asked it about the same data twice, probably going to give me 2 different answers.
Does it try to give the individual user something new each time? Or if there's 2 separate users across the country asking it the same thing, would they get the same answer?
The way most of them work now is every time you give it a prompt, it's trying to just put a new combination of words together for you. So something I actually love to do, my own use case, I like to write things. I have a very specific thing I write for, and I gave it a rubric. I said, this is how I want these all to look. Please always judge my writing against this rubric. However, if I ask it to do that twice in a row, I get 2 different numbers. So it always will look at things in a slightly different way based on, you think about it like you're playing Plinko. You guys remember Price is Right, the big thing, put the thing at the top. Okay, we're using probability at the top, and every layer goes down, the probability might shift a different way. So I could end up on this side of the board, I can look on this side of the board, they're all kind of in the way, in the ballpark of what I might want. They're all gonna be slightly different. So when I'm asking it to do some analysis, it can shift really quickly. So that's when we turn away from using generative AI to using the things like machine learning, which is like, I give a machine a very specific set of rules. And then I'm always gonna get the same answer. So in this case, if I was trying to do something like, we have referrals, there are a bunch of different formats. And staff spend a lot of time like figuring out where everything is, translating it, doing all this traffic, like it's a lot of error, there's very error prone. There are places here where generative AI might be really good. What is something that generative AI is probably pretty good at in this like little problem statement?
Drafting follow-up.
Sorry?
Drafting follow-up.
Drafting follow-ups, fantastic. I would also say like reading notes, even handwritten notes, pretty good. Like if you've ever put a handwritten note into an AI chatbot, it can usually do the optical character recognition and read the note. So it might be able to organize all the data for you, but what it's not going to be able to do is routing. Like, or it will do that for you, but that's probably not a decision you want to offload to a generative AI chatbot, right? So a possible solution here. You could use a generative AI chatbot though to write a little Python program that could take in a bunch of stuff for you, look at the data, look at the notes, summarize the notes, and then put it through a little program that used a bunch of criteria to make an initial decision, and then maybe to write an email for you. This is a more complicated use case, but I don't know very much about Python at all. You know, who's great at writing Python code is generative AI chatbots. And it becomes easier to make things that you might have needed a developer to work with a developer for months to do. You could start asking for things like that and really start getting down to nitty-gritty stuff. Now, this is like a bigger initiative, but these are the kinds of things that used to be like, we're never gonna be able to do this. Like, I'm never gonna be able to automate this task. And we can start to get to, as long as we know what generative AI is good at, what machine learning is good at, and where we would need to have the human aspect of that decision. Any thoughts or comments?
I've been trying to use AI for more complex tasks on my work, and I found very useful break the task like in pieces. Like don't ask them to do like take this Excel document and do all of the things.
Right.
I have to like walk along the okay, you're going to do this first, I'm going to check that, and then you're going to do this. And like the human piece is always important because if not, you're going to get information that what I'm going to do with this is not worth it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's why prompting is a helpful kind of like exercise, because it's like, okay, what do I actually need to check? It's probably what I should ask for first. I shouldn't go five layers deep on a process without me having checked on it along the way. And it's actually a perfect segue into using AI responsibly. I like to think about like humans, like as we think about like how we're orchestrating all this stuff with AI nowadays, like it's a partner, it's doing things with us. We're the lighthouse. We are looking out for the shoals. We are the guiding principle, and you should always be in control of what you're doing with the system. System should not be in charge of you. So our example, I use this as an example. This is our personal responsible AI statement for teaching and learning here at UT. And it's really grounded in what we believe about teaching and learning, not about the technology. What we believe about teaching and learning is that students should achieve learning outcomes. So that's how we talk about how we use AI responsibly. When I sit down with somebody and they said, I have this great idea how I want to use AI in my course, I say, okay, is it helping students learn what you intend for them to learn, or is it not? And then we can get into conversations like, is it offloading a piece of cognition that they need? Or are we hindering their learning because we're making them unsafe in some way? So this is our way of talking about how we want to use AI responsibly. We also put that piece of human development in there. Everything we do, we want to be human centered, even using AI in the classroom. Are we making humans' lives better? Yeah.
Just a quick question. What was the process to getting to this?
Great question. And I think y'all weren't here when I introduced myself, so I'm just gonna say, I'm an AI designer in the Office of Academic Technology. So what we did is at the Office of Academic Technology, we do a lot of policy around AI and technologies on campus. We organized a working group with people from our privacy and security office, from people from a couple of our different departments on campus, from student conduct, all of the stakeholders that we thought wanted to have a say in what this was. And we had a conversation about what our values are. So under here, we actually have 9 principles, things like intention, relationships. AI should never diminish the relationships between peers or between students and faculty. Once we had those principles, we were able to come up with this value statement. And it's super, super useful because it's broad enough that any technology problem that we bring to the table, we can actually think, okay, does this fit our values or not?
And so I'm VP of Responsible and Ethical AI for Austin AI Alliance,
Oh, cool.
chairwoman of the HBCU AI conference,
Nice.
and then president of Measure,
Do you
which,
listen?
yeah, very well. Yeah, we're both on that level.
Okay.
So I'm always really interested in like the interdisciplinary
Yes.
requirement in order to get to this.
Yes,
content.
and somebody I did not mention in that milieu was our Good Systems colleagues
Yeah.
here at UT. So they were also part of this. Sharon Stover from Good Systems was on our team. Yeah, we came together, we had a lot of conversations and we came up with this as. Thank you for asking. I love, this is like my favorite
Good
part of my
job.
work.
Yeah.
Thank you. So when you're thinking, I mean, we've already touched on this many times. So when we're thinking about any interaction we have with AI, we want to make sure there is a human in the loop. The intentional inclusion of human oversight and to maintain our authority, judgment, and accountability. Because here, at the end of the day, let's say I built that triage agent and it made a decision about a service to give to someone. If they came back to me and I did not check it, and it was the wrong service. They came back to me and said, this was the wrong service, what happened? Do I get to say, well, the AI did it, so, sorry. No, AI systems cannot take accountability for anything. They're not humans, they don't have responsibility. We have responsibility, and if you enact these technologies, you have the accountability for what they do. Which is why the concept of human in the loop is really important to maintain when we're talking about AI. So when I'm choosing a tool to use, a couple of things to ask myself as we're having conversations about how to choose a vendor. Can I explain how this works? You don't have to get technical, but like, is it a black box to you, or do you really understand like it goes from here to here, especially things that do things like make decisions? What criteria go into that decision? Is the generated content clearly marked? That's a big thing if we're talking about media. Like if I'm gonna use let's say I'm gonna use a marketing company that uses AI, are they telling people when the video is not real, of people is not real? That's an important piece.
Are they supposed to?
There's no regulation around it. But I mean, I feel better when somebody tells me that the person I'm looking at is not real. And I think that kind of trust is something, if it's important to you as an organization, maybe ask yourself this question. What data is being collected? We already touched on that one a lot, but like, what are they actually getting from me when I'm using this tool? It can be much more than just what I input. It can be where I'm coming from and what I work for and all that fun stuff. Who is accountable if this tool is inaccurate or harmful? So just like you have responsibility if you choose a tool to do something in your organization, does the company have a way for you to hold them accountable if something happens? Like a data breach. Who's accountable in that situation? And will this tool result in good outcomes for me and my community? So those are a little more abstract questions, but when you think about your mission, I think you can start to think about what kinds of questions come in with that. So I just was curious, from this conversation, is there one principle, like just one thing you'd want to take away about how you would like to take AI into the practice of what you do every day? You might have already had a principle. I'd love for you to share.
Folks on Zoom, y'all can speak up too.
Absolutely.
Yeah, go. So I love the concept of human in the loop. What we're doing at Measure and our own foundation as an organization that is a community engagement, data activism organization, we're always about community first. And so the concept that we are working on right now is this idea around humans, like plural, in the loop and their proximity to the problem that the loop is trying to solve.
Yeah.
And so that for us is I guess the principle that we're really thinking about, and like what qualifies that human or those humans in our case to be in the loop.
Yeah.
And what and to ensure that there is, and that bias is being at least interrogated when the generative outcomes are in front of us, right?
Right, but that goes back to the problems with the community engagement in general, right? Like, are the right people at the table? The same thing as we said when we're thinking about human in the loop. Are you the right person to make the judgment about what's happening with the tool? That's great. I love that. Anybody else just have even if it doesn't have to be like, I've written this principle in stone, anything that's coming to mind as you're thinking about this?
I mean, this is pretty obvious, but we never ever put any identifying information about any of our participants on AI or, even their data, like you said, UT has a clause with Copilot so that if we use it, they don't share it. But even then, we're very hesitant to even put our data and results in there.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's a personal line that we all have to be able to draw for ourselves, like where our ethical kind of boundary is around that.
I think just for me, it's about using it for increased efficiency. When I write something and for me personally, I'm working on things like a scope of work for a RFP release. And it's a lot of the same things. I have the bullet points of what I want, but I have to put it into a report, more traditional format. I can't just send out a bunch of bullet points. So that's where I try to, as long as I'm the one putting in what I know we're looking for, then I can let it, I guess, kind of fluff it up.
Yeah.
For lack of a better word.
Fair enough. Yeah. I'll use an example that I talk to faculty about all the time. Okay, do you want students to be able to write a lab report in a format, or do you want the right results in a lab report? So maybe it's okay if they take their results that they got and they asked AI to put it in a lab report format, because your goal is not to make a really fluffy report. Your goal is to have the information you need in the right format. Yeah, that's a great example.
Natalie on Zoom says, I think for me, especially in my work, the protection of privacy is super important.
Yeah, and that's just a push and pull we have using these systems, is that there's always something new to think about with as far as privacy goes. I'm happy to talk a little bit more. I know we're almost running out of time. So I asked you at the beginning, you know what, but since y'all were all AI curious, I feel like we're probably in the same spot. Unless y'all feel like after this 40 minutes, I'm an expert. But happy to hear if you have any questions. I just wanted to I point out the link to our responsible AI principles is there. There's a survey, and I always put in just my practice is I put in an AI disclosure about how I used AI to make this presentation. Any other thoughts or questions?
I have a question.
Yeah,
Sorry.
go ahead.
So one of the PowerPoints that you just showed, the one I guess where you were gauging people's comfort level with AI. Do you get a understanding of, I guess, the age groups that you're?
Oh, yeah, yeah. Well, I was saying, I talk to a lot of professors and they're usually at one end of the spectrum of, or they think they're experts, which they might be. There are a lot of people on this campus that make AI for a living. Or they are just completely avoidant. And, it's not as along age group lines in the people I talk to. A lot of it is discipline. So fine arts students and fine arts professors, I tend to find to be more avoidant. STEM kind of on the other end of the spectrum. Yeah, I think people bring a lot of their personal values to the use of this technology, which I think is really good. Like, technology adoption is not neutral, it's not a neutral act, and so we all have to bring our own values to it, and I think that's great. And that's what I spent a lot of time talking to people about. Great question, though.
A couple of folks on the chat are asking if the slides will be shared, is it a?
Absolutely, yeah.
And we also are recording the session, so y'all will have the link to the recording as well, especially if you missed any part of it.
Okay, well, thanks everybody, it was great talking to you today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone, for coming. Please do, let me put actually the link to the QR code in the chat. We'd love to hear what you thought. There's also a question there that asks about topics for future trainings. If y'all have ideas for things you'd like a training on, I would love to look into that to see if we can provide that. Also, for those of you here in person, I did want to mention, I am so sorry about the confusion with the parking garage and it being closed and whatnot. If you did have to pay for parking, I would like to reimburse that for you because we told you it would be covered. So if you, on the way out, whatever, when you get your receipt, just take a picture of it and email it to me. My email's on the screen. I think I sent an email to everyone this morning, so you should have it. So we would love to reimburse that for you. But yeah.
Thank you.
Any last questions? And I think there's a lot of thank yous on the chat as well, Casey. Well, thank you all for coming. Please take some tacos to go if you're here in person. And let's give Casey a round of applause. Awesome. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah.